Vampires, those mysterious, immortal beings that haunt our stories, our imaginations, and our fears. But are they real? Is there any truth behind the vampire myth, or is it just a product of folklore and fiction? Today, let's take a step back and explore the origins of the vampire myth. We'll look at the stories that shaped them, the fears that fueled them, and why they still captivate us today. But most importantly, we'll ask, do vampires really exist? Vampires have been a part of human culture for centuries, but the creature we know today wasn't always the same. The vampire myth has evolved over time, shaped by the fears and imaginations of the cultures that created it. The earliest vampire-like creatures can be traced back to ancient civilizations like Mesopotamia and Greece, where legends spoke of spirits that fed on the life force of the living. But it was in Eastern Europe, particularly among the Slavic peoples, where the vampire myth really took shape. In Slavic folklore, vampires were believed to be the risen dead, those who had died under mysterious or violent circumstances. They were thought to return to life and suck the blood of the living. And as fear often does, this belief spread rapidly throughout Europe, feeding off the anxieties of the time. One of the most fascinating aspects of the vampire legend is how it intersects with real-life fears, particularly the fear of death and disease. Throughout history, many of the symptoms of diseases like tuberculosis and the bubonic plague closely resembled what people imagined to be signs of vampirism. Pale skin, bloat at the mouth, and even bloating. These are all signs people associated with the undead, in the appearance of an individual who would cause the vampire paranoid friends to affect the loose symmetry of the physical immortality. And ultimately, in a time when medicine was not as advanced, these unsettling symptoms were often misunderstood. And so when the plague would strike a village and people began dying mysteriously, they would sometimes exhume bodies looking for signs of vampirism. And so imagine the fear. The idea that the dead could rise again and feed on the living was a way to explain the unexplainable, to find meaning in the suffering caused by disease. As time moved forward, the vampire evolved from a terrifying monster into something much more nuanced. The 19th century saw the birth of the modern vampire we know today, thanks to works like Bram Stoker's Dracula and John Polidori's The Vampire. The vampire was no longer just a symbol of death and disease, it became a symbol of immortality, forbidden desire, and power. These new vampires were charismatic, seductive, and often tragic figures, more complex than the mindless monsters of folklore. Through literature, film, and television, vampires became not just creatures of fear, but symbols of human longing, love, and the darkness within us all. But what about the science behind the vampire myth? Can vampires actually exist in the way we see them in the movies? From a scientific standpoint, the answer is simple: no. There are no creatures that are literally immortal or that drink blood to survive. But that doesn't mean there aren't some real-life conditions that could have inspired the myth. One example calls porphyria, a rare genetic disorder that causes sensitivity to sunlight and can result in symptoms that resemble some vampire traits, like pale skin and red-tinged urine. Another condition, Renfield syndrome, is a psychological disorder in which people have a compulsion to drink blood. But even this is just a rare condition, not a sign of supernatural abilities. While vampires may not exist in the way we think of them, their power as a symbol is undeniable. Throughout history, they've represented our deepest fears: death, the unknown, and the loss of control. But vampires also represent something more human: the desire for immortality, the fear of fading away. They are reflections of our own struggles with identity, desire, and the human condition. Vampires are not just monsters. They are mirrors of our deepest emotions and contradictions. They challenge our understanding of life, death, and everything in between. So, do vampires really exist? No, not in the supernatural sense. But their power as a myth, a symbol, and a part of our cultural imagination is very much alive. These vampires remind us of our own fears and desires, our longing for immortality, our struggle with mortality, and our fascination with the unknown. And while they may not drink blood, they continue to feed our imaginations and our stories. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this exploration of the vampire myth, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more content about history, culture, and the supernatural. And leave a comment below. What do you think the vampire myth really says about us? Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.